It not only is it most populations haven't had even a second population inventory. Many populations have never been inventoried, and the ones where we have repeated measures, there are issues with the studies that have done that, sampling issues.
When you say sampling, what does that mean?
Well, when you do a mark recapture study, you have to sort of cover the whole area so that every bear in that study has some probability of being recaptured. For example, if you had if you were sampling a city, say, and you only worked in the northern half of the city, the people in the southern half of the city would never have any opportunity to be captured or recaptured. So you'd estimate the population would be just the northern half of the city, and you'd get a population estimate that's only half as large as it should be. Now, obviously, people are moving around in a city and in a polar bear population, but essentially the accuracy of your estimate depends on the degree of that intermixture and the degree to which your model structure can kind of incorporate the fact that all animals are not equally available or vulnerable to capture.
When you say recaptured and captured, do you mean literally you capture them?
Yeah, the way it works in very simplistic terms is like if you would go to a population, you would catch 100 animals, mark them, let them all go, and then come back the next year and catch a second 100, and of that second 100, find 10 that were marked. Then you'd figure, okay, that first year, that 100 that we caught was 10% of the total. So we would say there was 1,000 polar bears in that population.
Wow.
But that assumes that none die. That assumes that none left the area. That assumes that your sampling was completely random. That assumes that every bear in that population is equally vulnerable to being captured and recaptured, and none of those things are true. So the reality is it's a highly technical, very involved process that is logistically difficult, sometimes even dangerous. And then that's not even the hard part. The hard part is finding an analyst that's smart enough that they can actually create capture and recapture and survival models that are accurate and that fit the actual way the sampling occurred, so that you get reliable information from these studies. It's not cut and dry. You don't just kind of fly over and count them. It's difficult. So
you actually, when you say capture now, I know what you mean, but how do you capture a polar bear to do what you're doing?
We just dart them. Usually fly over them with a helicopter and dart them with a tranquilizer dart. And then if they have cubs, we get down and do the cubs after. Most people have seen that on TV, with a guy leaning out the window with a little rifle and just, dart them with a mobilization drug and then put the marks on them, put an ear tag in, do a lip tattoo, take the measurements that you need to take, maybe hair sample, maybe claw tip, maybe some blood, maybe some fat, and then get back in the helicopter and do it again.
What's it like to be near and touching a polar bear that's sleeping?
Well, it's incredible, really. You never get used to it. It's something that tends to bring the best out in people. It's, like I say, difficult conditions sometimes, and the weather's not always the best. It can be really cold, or it can be really rainy in the fall, and sometimes there's bugs. But no one seems to complain. Everybody just kind of pitches in and does their best. We do the best we can to minimize the effect on the bears. You feel kind of lucky to be one of the few people that get to do a thing like that.
How long does it take for them from the time they have the dart in them till they pass out and they're sleeping?
Usually something like 4 to 6 hours. They can get up and move to a different place to sleep. Most of the time, if I've seen them a day or so later, they're able to run. I would guess it's probably 2 or 3 days, just like general anesthesia, before the bear's probably back to 100%.
Wow, so when you dart them, they're really out.
Well, you don't want them waking up when you're working on it.
Have you ever been worried they would wake up?
Well, I never had much experience with the drugs that were used in between Sertraline and Telazol, the one that's being used most times now. But in between, there was a drug combination called ketamine rompin, and it had the bad effect that sometimes the bear would suddenly just wake up in the middle of the handling process. And as I say, that was a time when I wasn't really in the field much, so I never had that experience. But some of my colleagues did, and some of it was pretty exciting.
What did they say?
They said they were really grateful for Telazol. This is one that's very easy to read, very safe for the bears. It really revolutionized the handling, and the loss rate, the ones that were injured, went way down. Canadian Wildlife Service, Ian Sterling and his program really, developed that for the rest of us.
Ian Sterling what does he do?
Well, he was the Canadian Wildlife Service polar bear biologist, their senior biologist. He's emeritus right now, but still very active. He works out of Edmonton.
And he came up with that new drug for polar bears to be tested?
Well, the pharmacologist came up with it, but before it can be used, the veterinarian authorities require to go out and field test it, make sure that there's nothing about the delivery or the way it affects, get a large sample size, what are the dosage levels that are appropriate. And then once that work is done, and there's that guidance for the rest of the people to come along and use it, then they're more comfortable allowing others to take it forward. So that's one of the things that the CWS program in Churchill has really done for the rest of not only just polar bears in Canada but around the world, is provided a kind of a field laboratory. And they've done a lot of the development work for telemetry, to testing of new drugs, new methods in physiology, simply because it's easier to provide, easier to access the bears there because they're right outside the community of Churchill.
What happens with the cubs when the adult polar bear gets darted and goes to sleep?
Well, even if they're fairly large, they usually stick pretty close. The smallest ones in the spring can be approached and just you just throw a rope over their neck and just give them a little injection with a needle so you don't harm them with the dart. When by the time they're in the fall, they're getting pretty big for that. Some people come and use just a jab pole to do those bears. I use a lighter kind of dart, and I usually do them from the air. By the time they're yearlings or 2-year-olds, they're too big. Then they have to be darted from the air or darted from the ground, but darted anyway.
Wow, I wonder if the darts hurt them.
Oh, they hurt them. It's you can see they wince. It's an explosive injection of the drug. It's a mechanical sort of a device. It's got a little barb on it. We have to nick the skin to get that little needle out, and honestly, after you do a few, and the excitement of it kind of fades. You feel like you're darting your dog every time. You try to do it perfectly, but you're human. You don't always do things perfectly. Sometimes the bears behave in unpredictable ways. Sometimes there are places where it's difficult to capture them. We all do our best. We all really regret it if the bear's compromised in any way, and frankly, our safety record is just really short of incredible. A lot of veterinarians don't even accept it because we have about the same mortality as veterinarians do with animals that are brought into a clinic and on their table with anesthesia. So, but we know that it's true because part of our studies is estimating survival, and if the animals were dying after or something like that, we would know it because the survival rates would be too low.
Wow. Where else in the world does someone with your background, who do you look to for respectability and credibility in terms of polar bear expertise? Who are people that you admire and institutions that you see out there that are doing the right thing?
Well, before all this anthropogenic global warming came along, we used to look to each other. There was an acknowledgement that no one person can be good at everything, and so often programs were done as collaborations. I've worked a lot with other agency researchers, university researchers, graduate students. But I would say really the group that I look to sort of for review, if you will, or to kind of double check my perceptions, or to kind of know if I'm doing a good job or not, are Inuit hunters. They're the ones who have grown up and lived in proximity with the animals, who have had a chance to see them doing natural behaviors, not just running from the helicopter. They're the ones who see the changes in distribution that occur when we do our study, who come after to see bears that we've captured, because we make a little mark on their fur so that we know them, don't catch the same ones twice. They're the ones who kind of give us the feedback on whether our estimates of population numbers and sustainable harvest rates are correct or incorrect.